So hello and welcome to another episode of Rebel City Podcast. Matt, how did we get to episode 100?
I've got absolutely no idea, to be honest with you. It seems like, 2.5 years have flown by. We've been pushing this off because we had hoped it might have been able to get done live in a pub or, do a wee live thing for episode 100. It's not panned out that way, obviously, with circumstance, but at the same time, we are extremely happy to be welcoming Councillor Kim Long to talk in the first ever podcast in the build-up to the election this year, which to me seems appropriate for, a kind of anniversary episode.
Absolutely, and I think I'll speak for myself, won't speak for you, Matt. Somebody that's in search for an alternative vote that in the upcoming election, or basically my vote's up for grabs. It's not my natural SNP. I'm voting SNP, which I've done in previous elections. So I think the Green Party is the best one to get in first of all, because it's the one I've been looking at the most anyway. But anyway, Kim, it's lovely to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. You are the councillor for Denniston and North East. So that's Matt's constituency and where I grew up.
I'll represent.
Well,
hi Denniston.
Hi Denniston.
Hi Denniston. There you
Merchant
go.
City East.
Merchant City East. That's what we are now. Exactly. Yep.
Gentrifying East End. I grew up in Carntine. I don't know if Carntine falls into your constituency.
No, it's just outside it. So the boundary with Hogarth Park is where I stop. So it's a really weird ward that I've got. So below the M8, I've got Haghill and Denniston all the way up to Drygate. So the corner of Duke Street and High Street. So pretty much into the town. And then on the other side of the motorway, I represent Royston, Sighthill and Germiston. So it's a totally
You're my councillor
weird...
as well.
Sorry?
You're my councillor as well then, up in Springburn.
There you go. Well, not just up to Springburn. It stops at the Tesco. So it's a really weird... It's a really weird area with we've got a motorway in between us, and all the communities are very different from each other, and don't have the same needs and experiences. So it's a delightful challenge to try and get to know all the communities, and I wouldn't presume to know what the different communities need. It's my job to kind of get out and ask and work out what they need and try and advocate for them. But it's quite challenging when I've got 6 completely separate communities.
How much credit are you taking for Denniston being the 7th most trendy area in the world? How much of that are you claiming?
Oh, it's definitely on me. Yep. Did you
That's
see in the
what I like to
mural, the mural that was painted outside Redmond's pub of Denniston? And they've gone back and put some burning tyres in the background and the Lidl sign and everything because it was looking a bit too posh.
When we were growing up, I'll be honest, Duke Street was not a welcoming place for me or where Matt came from or where I came from. And I was saying that to my girlfriend actually. We were walking up to a shop in Posel, just at the top of Saracen Street. And I was saying to her, would you believe that this was like a war zone when I was a teenager? And now you can just freely walk up and down it. So things have changed, and I think Duke Street and East End, as we're saying, Merchant City East, we're making a joke about that, but things have vastly improved in that area over the last sort of 20, 30 years, big time. So you were the first Green councillor in the area,
yes,
which is some achievement. Is that area generally a Labour stronghold?
I think it had been when we were going around doors in the run up to the 2017 election. Met so many people who were just disillusioned. So some people who were disillusioned with sort of everything, not specifically Labour, and then some folk who were just, done with it and couldn't bring themselves to that, even though it'd been in their in their family for, this is what we do, we vote Labour. But because, we had just a sort of relentlessly positive campaign, we knocked 7,000 doors and just went and spoke to people, because I lived there, I was a resident, I'm coming from a community work background. I was just look, I'm just here to get stuff done, and so people gave me their trust, which was pretty amazing, really.
That's amazing. So just hard work, just a bit of graft and some relatability, and you've got your foot in the door in the area. That's so good. Is that the area that you're running for MSP in 2021 elections?
So for 2021, we're I'm on the list for Glasgow. So anyone in Glasgow that votes Green will hopefully get me as their MSP.
Excellent. Are we seeing a bit an increase in available sort of Green candidates in the city? Because I think at the last Scottish parliamentary election, prior to all this, had not necessarily done the type of research that I'd probably expect to do this year, and walked in expecting to be able to take the SNP in my sort of first vote and the Green in the second vote. And I don't think there was a Green candidate available the last time. Am I right in saying that, or was it?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember, because we've had so many elections in the past 5 years. They all start blending into each other, but yeah, like we're kind of yet to announce what we're doing exactly in terms of constituencies, but in terms of the list, so it's Patrick Harvey's number 1, I'm number 2, and then number 3 is an amazing woman called Nadia Kanyangi, who would be the first woman of colour MSP, the first refugee MSP. So yeah, and then we've got an amazing list of candidates as well. So like everyone in Glasgow is going to be able to vote Green.
So you guys like the Scottish equivalent of AOC and the
the squad.
The squad, yeah, the squad. It feels like that to me. It really does feel like that.
That's really that. I mean, what a compliment! Like AOC is total goals, but yeah, like there's a bunch of the kind of lead candidates who are women across the country. You know, we're friends, like we're pals. We've been through this together, and we do support each other through, because politics can sometimes be pretty hostile for women. And I dug out. I had a friend made me a cape, which is just amazing. I put it on my office door to, like, you know, make me feel confident. And my pal Laura Moody, who's standing in the south of Scotland for the Greens, and she's absolutely amazing. She's like such an experienced campaigner. She's a mum of 4. She's a total like Wonder Woman. And she texts me saying, right, okay, so when we get our offices, are we putting up your cape? And it was just like, yeah, you know, that's just a really inspiring thought of like, can we be there and support each other? You know, that would be just amazing.
It's cool to have that network around you. I mean, obviously you've touched on hopefully what we'll plan out in the future for you. Like, let's just, as we're getting started, maybe cover how did you get into politics? Where did it start for you?
Yeah, well, this is, to be honest, it's quite nice to have the chance to talk about this, because quite often you get asked that question, you have to boil it down to like one sentence, and that's awfully difficult to do. So there was sort of different threads of my life came together at different points. So when I was really young, I was really lucky to have 2 fantastic youth workers, and they supported us to explore all kinds of kind of global justice issues. So I went to my first protest when I was 10, and that was about debt liberation for countries in the global south. And then, but that sort of,
it's an interesting starter for a 10-year-old as well.
I know, like
world economy, like just dip your toes in there, right?
Exactly. So I didn't have a huge grasp of it, but I was excited by it, and I did have enough, like, kids know when things are unfair, you know, so I did have that understanding. And then actually it was the anti-Iraq war protests that were my like political awakening kind of about here. So I was 13, I went in the protests, and I was so inspired. Like, it just felt, I mean, I think inspired is too shallow a word really, because it was just so moving to be like out on the streets with all these people that I didn't know, I'd never met, you know, from all parts of the city that I you know, didn't know. And we were all, it was like a sense of something bigger than myself, you know. And so I joined the CND, and I put a poster up in my bedroom window, and, you know, no war. And I'm sure the like 4 people that walked past with their dogs, you know, found that inspiring. But that was like a turning point for me, because then, you know, weeks later when Tony Blair still went to war, and I just felt like this sense of, but all of us were out. That was like the biggest protest that there's been in generations in Glasgow. How could you just do that without, with just sort of dismissing the voice of the citizens? And I mean, like, it's total privilege to get to the age of 13 without realising that the government is not on your side. But that was still a big kind of turning point. So I've always sort of in that way been like political, but small p.
That's so cool, because we've, and I think I've spoke a lot on the podcast about how that felt like a turning point, like a sort of fracture in a society that happened at that point, where we had always felt that if the masses took to the streets and wanted their voice to be heard, for it to be ignored like that by somebody who'd been voted in on a campaign of hope. I mean, it was always, things can only get better, and Tony Blair was like our Bill Clinton or our Barack Obama to some respects. And I feel like Labour, that was a point where it kind of splintered the support. And I've always I've kind of cited that as where people started to move to the right. And it's so good for me personally, just selfishly, to hear somebody that was inspired by that negative event to then push on into a more hopeful politics rather than what seems to be, let's go back to just moving towards the right. So like, that's amazing, and I'm sure you're not alone. You're not the only one. So like that, the Iraq War protest could be like the Sex Pistols at Manchester, where everybody went and formed a band. Well, everybody went and get into politics if they attended that.
I mean, that was like, looking at it now, I can see it as a real milestone, but I didn't sort of join any of the rest of the dots, you know, for a while, because then, so I left home and I went to Dundee to go to uni and had an absolute ball. And I was already doing youth work. So when I went to Dundee, I became part of this just totally amazing project called Hot Chocolate Trust. And it's right in the middle, right in the centre of Dundee. And it's basically just open doors, and young people come from wherever, and because they're in town, and then we were there to basically give them hospitality. So like, come in, you can have a safe place that is warm, that is not freezing cold and raining, and you can get a cup of tea or some hot chocolate. And we had like, you know, there was like a sports hall and an art room and a room with just couches in it to sleep or snog frequently. And then, but we weren't there to put on activities, and we weren't there to mold them into anything. We were just there to be present and to get alongside young people. And if they then wanted support on a housing issue or whatever, then we would offer them that support, but everything was completely on their own terms and directed by the young people. And that was pretty radical. And being part of Hot Chocolate, and it was very much like being part of it because there was a community of volunteers and teams. So I was there, like I did a Tuesday night session every week for 4 years. And as part of the team, we held each other in a very, again, a pretty radical way. It was about accountability, but also like support, because, you know, sometimes it was really harrowing. And so, like, for example, at the end of every single session, so we would, you know, the young people would go away, we'd do all the dishes and clean up, but then we would have like a debrief, and we would talk through how was tonight, like, so what went well, what didn't go well, how can we learn from it? And so that ability to process stuff and to be like, do you know what, I don't think I handled this very well. And then we would sort of collectively say, well, what can we do next time? And it was never, because with youth work, with anything that you're doing working with people, there's no right answer a lot of the time. You know, there's not, it wasn't like trying to memorize a set of rules, but it was more like, in this scenario, this is what happened, and actually this time, doing this next time would maybe minimize the danger, or, you know, or if there'd been some, you know, some relational harm, then we could go and try and repair that. So that was really radical, and I learned so much, and also from the young people. And like, it was young people that came into the centre who had basically fallen through all the gaps everywhere else, you know. So it was young people that didn't feel welcome at home. A lot were not at school, a lot were kind of falling through everything, and we had, you know, there was just so much chaos because young people were coming from, you know, homes that well, maybe they'd been thrown out because they were queer or trans. Maybe they were at home with a parent who had an addiction, and there was, you know, that kind of level of chaos. There was young people who were homeless, or like, so sometimes they literally didn't have a bed for the night, and that wasn't even an issue because they'd just be out all night. But like, also that they were just really vulnerably housed and sofa surfing and everything. So being alongside that and kind of in the midst of that, and then we didn't turn people away if they were drunk or high, because we'd rather that they were inside and had like some water, and, you know, we could keep an eye on them.
Of course.
Which was interesting with the police and stuff. So like, being part of that community really broke me apart and put me back together differently, do you know? And so at the end of that, like, so I finished, my degree was in English, which I loved, but also European studies, which, you know, RIP, like, everything I learned is obsolete. So I was like, what do I do, you know?
Nervous laugh.
Yeah, lol. So but I was like, oh, what am I going to do with myself? And like, I was just like, well, I want to do what I have been doing, you know. Hot chocolate is so important, and I want to be part of something like that. But I was also moving to Glasgow, so I moved to Glasgow and had a coffee with this phenomenal woman called Alison Urie, who was actually the founder of Hot Chocolate. And she'd moved to Glasgow as well. And I didn't really know her that well, but we had this chat, and she was looking for staff cover for a summer project working in Polmont Young Offenders Institution, teaching guitar classes. Now, I do not play the guitar, but I was a youth worker and I sing. So, and I was paired up with a musician called Andrew Howie. So the two of us spent the summer working with young women in Polmont who weren't even supposed to be there. It was only because there was asbestos in Corntonvale, so they'd been sort of shoved into Polmont, and that was another scenario of like being just kind of broken open by the level of brokenness is the word that I would use in terms of being alongside these girls, and we had such a laugh, and like it was so bizarre to go into that space, and there was always just so much tension and so much there's so much happening going in, you know, you could feel it, you walk in, it just felt like, you know, if you could like tune a guitar or like pull the strings of a guitar too tight, you know, it just felt like that was how it felt the whole time, that everything was just about to snap. And we would go in and like be able to like one time we just made up a stupid song about, I think it was about one of the officers, to be honest, but and then the girls were just like shouting fuck at the top of their lungs and like really angry strumming, and it worked to diffuse the tension, you know. And obviously that helps for 5 minutes, right? So there's no magic wand, but it was again like, oh my god, I need to be like, this is where I need to be doing stuff, you know, this is where we need to be. And Alison was on her own journey of that, and I kind of went back to it, so like, I'm in here, you know. So she'd met Fergus McNeill, who is a professor of criminology at Glasgow Uni, and very like respected in his field. So so Alison and I and a bunch of other people, we set up this new social enterprise called Vox Luminis, and it was doing music in and around, well, cultural kind of things, but at that point it was music in and around the criminal justice system. So all of that was happening, and like I was just learning so much and being so, it was like a cycle of just being absolutely horrified, and then at the same time just amazed by the kind of strength and resilience of the folk that I was working with. And then IndieRef was also happening, and I got involved with my local kind of Yes campaign, and so that was the first time I had done like door knocking and canvassing and that kind of stuff, and it was a lot easier than I thought. And also, like, I'm trying to put this politely, but I had always, maybe in the back of my head, I'd always had like, maybe I could go into politics when I'm like 55, do you know, when I'm like old enough, when I'm smart enough, when I've got enough qualifications, when I've got And in that campaign, I was alongside some people who were pretty well established, and some of them were brilliant, right? But some of them had not a clue what they were doing. And I'm a very like, I'm just very organized, and I'm good at like motivating people and stuff. And so there was one day that we were out in this van with all these people, and it was just chaotic. And I was just like, oh my God, give me that clipboard. Like, I could do this better, you know? So that was a bit of a turning point again of like, okay, why am I ruling myself out here, you know? And then when we lost IndieRef, I was just, you know, so devastated and, you know, cried myself to sleep. But I just thought, well, if this matters so much, then I don't know why I'm waiting till I'm 55, you know, I need to do something now. And that then, like a month later, I was on a bus to Faslane for a protest, and I was sitting next to my pal Sam, who is like Brazilian immigrant settled in Scotland. He was part of Hot Chocolate as well, so he knew where I was coming from, and we were just like processing everything and talking about IndieRef, and we just were talking, and it just through the conversation, it was just this epiphany of like, oh shit, see if we had something as good as Hot Chocolate in every corner of Scotland, we're still only like just about sometimes keeping people's heads above the water. And it takes everything we've got, and at some point you need to go upstream and stop people being pushed under, you know. So yeah, that was a kind of like, right, okay, what do I do? So
it feels quite like a natural progression in a lot of senses, like.
Yeah, like it was, I suppose it was a kind of point of everything coming together. And then so I spent the next couple of years like both doing community work, so as well as projects with Vox. I then did, like, I worked with Glasgow Women's Library, so I ran their like young women's program, and it's another absolutely phenomenal organisation. And
proper like jewel in the crown organisation for the city.
Exactly, and it should be funded as such. So yeah, like just having these like really transformative experiences of working with people, and then also by that point, like I'd already been a Green Party member, but I got really, I tried to take a small step of dipping my toe in the water of joining the branch committee, and then that became like running the running the branch and organising.
Give me that clipboard again.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like with a bunch of really great people, I mean, that is such a surprising thing. I did not go into politics to make friends, you know, to be honest. Like I had a lot of friends. I didn't need pals, but it's been amazing to just meet all these like very, you know, like-minded people who are not just sitting in a pub talking endlessly, but like actually getting shit done, like making things happen.
Yes.
You know,
I think like this is really such an inspiring story for people to hear, because episode 101 that we recorded yesterday with Natalie for Cisco. Don't know if you're Cisco Recovery. I'm not sure if you're aware of Cisco Recovery. I had said that basically people with lived experiences, as Natalie put it. Natalie kept reiterating this lived experience, and I think the word that's actually like important in there is experience. I was advocating for people like Natalie to go into politics, and she was saying that she gets this sort of thought of just Natalie, ex-addict, what am I going to... And I think that's the same sort of thing, that it's almost like an imposter syndrome. But when you get yourself in on the front line, as I'm sure a lot of young people do, and realise, wait a minute, these old people know fuck all about what's going on. They don't know how to speak to people, and I'm going to engage, so like get out my way. It feels like that's where we need to go with politics, is to encourage people with these experiences. Because when I think about politics, sometimes I do get this vision of Jacob Rees-Mogg in his Rolls Royce with his teddy bear going to Dundee and getting chased back down to Westminster. And I think that's everything that's wrong with politics. But what you're explaining, somebody who goes and doesn't necessarily live that life, but goes into the activism and helping out, volunteering and putting your time and blood, sweat and tears into it, then for you to move into the political spectrum, I think is like, go for it. Like, you know, this is what we need. We need people that have seen this, because how can, like I'd said yesterday to Natalie, Mary Black had said to us when we interviewed Mary, how could Boris Johnson know what it's like? How could Jacob Rees-Mogg know what it's like? They've been privately educated, they've had nannies, they'll never know. So what you're saying is you've seen it firsthand, and it inspired you to become a councillor, and now you're running for MSP. So more power to you, because I think that's really important.
I think the electorate can sense that authenticity as well. I think one of the things that puts a lot of people off, and when I talk to people about their political journeys and how they got into it, especially when we're talking to a number of politicians as we have, I always get that Billy Connolly thing in my head, where it's, you know, the people who put themselves forward for political power are almost certainly the people who should be excluded for it. And that's when we sense that inauthenticity of some of them. But I think when we're talking to yourself in this, as I say, this what feels like natural progression from activism towards policy making, like we can also sense that in the electorate too. And I think that's something that is actually really important for us to start seeing again, because I don't think we can actually rebuild trust in politics in the way we need to if we don't feel like we're representatives or actually like authentic.
That's exactly it. No, I really appreciate you saying that, and I think communities can smell bullshit a mile off, and that contributes to a lack of trust. And it's so important. And like, so an example would be, this was a couple of years ago, I was at a conference. It was a conference about criminal justice, something or other, right? And it was in Berlin, and you could just tell that there's some people there because of the excitement, the wee bit of, it's a bit sexy going in the prison for the day, you know? And like, I just didn't feel like I was there anyway, because I didn't have like a PhD, and I wasn't kind of part of the academia, and I wasn't part of the policy making thing anyway. And I was younger, and I was just there. And anyway, but then at the break time, right, there was guys from the jail who'd been put in the room as well, and they were kind of sharing their story. And that made it sound a bit more exploitative than I think it was, but it was very much like them and them. There was two groups. And at the break, I just went over and had a cup of tea and was standing talking to these guys, because I didn't know if any of them had been part of our projects or anything. And no one else did that. And I wasn't doing it as a crusade. I didn't think about it. I wasn't there to, I wasn't making a point. I was just used to that, because that's what we always did in projects. We went in and we went in and shook hands with everybody in the room, learned their names, used their names. And that was, again, just how we operated. It wasn't a deliberate tactic, but that simple thing totally changed. We realized later it totally it changed how things normally work in a prison, because you've just got numbers and individuals don't really matter, and everything's so transient as well. So like, I was just operating on, this is how I work. But I just stood there noticing that all these like people in fancy clothes were on the other side of the room, and it was just it was bizarre. But like, those are the people that are making decisions, those are the people that are deciding where the new prison's going to be, and all these things. And it just like smacks of how we need, like, that's the point of having representative democracy, which we absolutely do not have, and that's why it's important to have like women in politics and people of colour and blah blah blah, because otherwise it's not that decisions aren't being made about disabled people or Black people. It's decisions are being made about disabled people by people who are not disabled, or people are making decisions. Predominantly white people are making decisions that affect Black people, and we need to have institutions and decision making rooms that are full of people who are affected and who get those decisions. I do think
people that are willing to engage with the other side as well, because it looks as though, through the example you're talking about, that didn't seem to, although everybody was there to talk, nobody was actually really there to engage with the other side or anybody else that was participating. So we need that outreach.
Or even consider that actually the answers to what the questions that you're asking might be contained within the people that have gone through this, and maybe they're the experts. Do you know? Absolutely. Like, not even just to kind of listen to people out of human decency, but like, if you want to know how to make a better immigration system, then maybe we need to be having that immigration system be designed by people who've gone through it, who've survived.
Let's speak to some immigrants who've been through it. We'll move on for just your early days and talk a wee bit more, because we were very fortunate in our early days to get invited into the City Chambers by David McDonald, who was kind enough to kind of show us around the building. And I mean, it's a beautiful building. What's it like to go day one, new job, and have to go and face this, thing that, we all have, we all know it, we all, we've maybe not all been to it, but it's got to be quite an intimidating, because I mean, we were walking in for like an hour-long interview, like pure, wow, this place is awesome. So I mean, what's it like to like show up on day one for work and be like, this is my job now?
Yeah, absolutely mental. The bizarre thing about elections is that, so like polling day is on the Thursday, you spend the entire day at a polling station, like your feet are absolutely louping by the end of it. You then stay up all night at the count, although local elections actually we got a wee bit of sleep because the count was during the day the next day, right? So Thursday voting, Friday count. You then just got Saturday, Sunday. You're high as a kite and also like absolutely exhausted, and you've got a million people to thank, and everybody in the world is texting you. And it was just like, because my campaign, we were very, very, we knew that because it's only there's only 3 councillors in that ward. So if it's 4 councillors, it's easier to get in because the threshold is lower. So because there's only 3, we knew no matter how well we could do, and we knew we were doing well in the campaign, but we didn't know that I was going to get in at all. So it was very much like, I was quite numb, honestly. Like, there's photos of me like gleeful at the count that I don't really recognise, because I'm like, I don't know what I was feeling. And also because like people didn't get in, your pals didn't get in, or so the count is a really bizarre experience. Dead exciting, but like all emotions. And then 2 days, I don't really remember the Saturday, Sunday, because it was just like, what's happening? And then you start work the next day. There is no transition time. So there's no, the American system, obviously many problems with America, right? But they do have one thing, right, in terms of you have an election, then you've got a grace period before you have to start. because I mean, I didn't know what to wear because I was a community worker, and you can't just put on a suit if you're a woman. You have to like work out something that's smart but not too smart, and like I didn't know what the levels of smartness were going to be.
Yeah.
And it was bizarre. We had this like mad freshers fair thing that they had in the banquet hall of the city chambers, and they had all the different directorate heads standing behind trestle tables, and you had to kind of go around and see what they all did and shake their hands. I've absolutely no idea what it was because it was so overwhelming. I had no idea who any of them were, and I argued with a man from Clyde Gateway. This is really bizarre, but he was like, introducing himself, and he was like, "How do you feel about regeneration?" And I was like, wary, and he was really angry at me. Like, wow, this is day one. So yeah, that is weird. And then also, I mean, I didn't have a desk, so my phone was on the floor, and it had the name of the councillor that didn't get in. Again, it had his name on it, and like the first phone call, like the phone rang, and when you're sort of all looking at it, sort of like gingerly, so I go towards it with my hand outstretched, like, oh God, who's on the end of the phone? And it was horrendous, right? Because it was this woman who had 2 kids and was homeless and had reached out to this previous councillor for help, and he had like not gone to where he was supposed to meet her, and then there had been no handover. There had been no handover whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I have absolutely no idea what to do. So I just kind of listened, was sympathetic, and I was like, let me get back to you. And then thankfully, by the next time, like I phoned her back the next day and things had progressed. So she was all right. But I was just like, what kind of system is it that there's no handover of constituents? Because we deal with like bin complaints, but then you've also got people who are really in a very precarious situation. So I was just, and then you don't get training on that. So I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? So yeah, that was very much in at the deep end. And yeah, as you say, the building is very intimidating and built of a lot of like we're starting to talk about how the wealth of Glasgow is built on the back of slavery, but that's very much evident. And then
you watch Parks and Rec?
Yes, I absolutely love Parks and Rec.
So it reminds me of like Leslie Knope showing people around and like, oh, we've covered up the bit where we killed the Native American, and they're just kind of like, that's what Glasgow City Chambers is like when you look at it through the lens of like the slavery aspect that's been really hot topic the last year. If you go there and you visit, I think if I ever go again, I will be looking at it like that. It does kind of feel like
it is wild, and like
beautiful,
just the amount of I mean the marble is beautiful, but it's quite like Hogwarts though. Like there's staircases in places. I still get lost. I had to go in to pick up a new computer about a month ago, and like I've been working from home for about a year, and so I had to go in to get this computer, and I took the wrong turn out of an office, and I ended up going down some stairs and to a dead end. I was like, I have no idea where I am. I don't know how I've ended up here. Don't know where this staircase is. I just retraced my steps and tried to find a different way, but it's really confusing. There's loads of different stairs, and there's like the public facing bit, which is the kind of all white marble, but then there's the parallel staircase on the other side that doesn't go up all the floors, and there's a secret lift in a different corner, and then there's the wee secret staircase to go up to the roof and stuff, which I really want to go up, but I don't think they would let me. But yeah, and then like our office, the Green Office, is on the top floor in the corner of the portrait gallery. So it's where all the old Lord Provost's portraits are.
Yeah.
And that is really intimidating, honestly, because like I'm walking in there, I was 26 and got elected, feeling like, what is this? And then you walk in and all these portraits of these like enormous old white men, half of them are in military dress, and they're all sort of staring at you as you like go to your office where you don't have a desk. So
welcome to City Chambers, no pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And like in the kind of debating chamber, because it's all sort of it's all wooden and leather seats, so the seats are dead comfy, right? But I am too small to put my feet on the ground, so I have to put them up. Yeah, it was not built for me. I have to put them up on the back of the ones in front, which is again fine, but not for a 5-hour meeting, because that is too uncomfortable. Or I've like ripped my tights all the time because the wood snags. And the toilets, there's fewer women's toilets, and they are miles away from anything, so you miss, like, I have a productivity lack because it
there's a number of ways it wasn't designed for you then.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Just to like move on, like just wary of time. I'm enjoying the conversation, but we're like nearly 45 minutes in and we're just nattering away. Just trying to like bring it into like why we're here and talk about like the campaign and talk about the Green Party. I think that the last sort of maybe like the last year, there's been quite, within the Yes movement, there's been quite a lot of sort of opinions and a lot of movement between people. And I think that me and Matt are included in that, where we're not liking a lot about what we're seeing in Scottish politics of late. The GRA seems to be a very sort of, I don't know what way we would put it, like quite a, don't know, Matt.
I think we've seen the day. There was an article that they published saying that within the SNP movement, it's actually a pretty small proportion of people who are really noisy. But I think over the course of the last year or so, it has, that noise has sown doubts in people who want to vote yes, but maybe no longer feel that, the SNP represent them to the extent that it was once the case. And I think what we're trying to get at here is that the Greens have sort of gradually and slowly built over sort of recent years in the wake of yes movements and stuff like that. Feels like there's a real opportunity for the Greens to like just be themselves and actually have like a substantial natural growth. Is that part of what you're looking at as election strategy?
Yeah, like I really hope so. And like the polls would certainly suggest that, we're consistently polling on about 11 or 12 MSPs. And I think exactly what you just said, Matt, in terms of being ourselves. Like, I think it would be problematic if we just started like twisting ourselves into different shapes to try and like spot a loophole and be like, oh, hello, come to us, I think we've got to trust that we stand for the values that we have done for a long time, and we're maybe a bit more bolshy now in talking about them, but that's what we've been saying. We've been talking about the climate emergency for a long time, but we've also been standing up for human rights for a long time, and when it's not been popular, do you know what I mean? And like, one of the things that I really value about our party is that we set the policy. The policy is made by all the members, and it's one member, one vote. And no matter who you are, Patrick Harvey has the same weight in the conference as someone who just joined yesterday. And also we hold each other accountable to the party policy that is set by members, and all of us are bound by that, including those of us who are elected representatives. So, for me, it's like, right, okay, so human rights for everybody are unconditional, and we have to support that. We have to support the rights of trans people. We have to keep doing that. We've been doing it for ages before it was, absolutely something that Twitter exploded over.
He's got a really solid record on those issues.
So what are you just mentioned the climate emergency. There's been quite a lot of sort of misinformation, disinformation, and good information amongst the sort of climate emergency. And one of the ones that keeps getting sort of popping up for me, especially when I'm talking to people, is that, well, it's kind of pointless what we do if these 4 big companies don't do it, in China and India, and let's look at like the big polluters. Is there anything that we actually can do personally, or in like a city-wide and even countrywide as Scotland, because we're a small country, to actually make like a good impact on the climate emergency?
Yeah, like it's a really good question. I think that for me is a really troubling way in which environmentalism has been hijacked by capitalism, and it's about like, you have the wrong toothbrush. Let me advertise to you which toothbrush that you should buy instead and feel less guilty. So then you've got people who are watching that and feeling guilty because they've not got everything sort of perfect. And like some things are really complicated, like which washing powder should you be using and blah, 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 right? And then for a lot of people, and I would say like the majority of people in Glasgow, if you're just trying to survive, like toothbrushes are not on your radar, right? So there's a danger that then that gets, if that's what like caring about the planet gets reduced to, and this sort of greenwashed capitalism absolute shite, then that's not for anybody. That's so unhelpful. And it's just like about buying more shit as well. So it's just growth. So like that's
just slapping the word green on something doesn't necessarily make it green.
Exactly. So there's that, right? But then also, what I want to be talking about is how in our city, right? So we've already got the impacts of climate, which impact on poorer communities more. So whether like the kind of global stuff, like, yeah, absolutely, we do have the kind of corporations that need to be held accountable, and there's all those stuff. There is all that that's kind of inescapable, but our city has so much inequality in it, and that is related to climate. And some of the things about climate globally are much more obvious, because you can see like flooding in coastal communities, or huge displacement of people. So it's easier to see how globally the people who've caused the least amount of kind of emissions are still being affected the worst. But that's happening in our city as well. It's just much less obvious. So the fact that, like, I think it's over half of Glaswegians don't have access to a car, right? So you're forced to rely on public transport, and our public transport is dreadful. You've got the fact that, where was the M8 built? It wasn't in the West End. And that's the same across the UK. I think there was just a report yesterday talking about how air pollution and poor air quality is responsible for twice the number of deaths that they thought. And it particularly impacts poorer communities, BME communities, and it's people who, because if you've got worse health, if you've got like bad heart health or bad lung health, like, again, that's to do with poverty, that's to do with all those other factors. So air quality is not this like academic thing, like it's literally killing people, and it's killing people in uneven patterns, and that's to do with poverty. Or thinking about food, right? So we've got places like, how long have people in Castlemilk been trying to campaign for somewhere that they can get access to fresh food? It doesn't exist, right? And so we've got places in our city that are food deserts, and you've also got places that so many people are reliant on food banks, and you get tinned food, and obviously like that's a lifeline, right? But we need to do so much better.
We definitely do. I mean, we've seen the pictures in George Square just today with the people queuing in the snow, -5 conditions, to accept food parcels, and you're like, man, we need to do better than that. Like, that's just unacceptable.
Exactly. And then, like, I learned recently that the housing in Knightswood was designed after the war, that every home had access to growing space at the back, so you had enough room to grow vegetables. And like, so in terms of how Glasgow, like, whether we like it or not, Glasgow's going to be impacted by climate change. We already have been, so we're getting more flooding, more extreme weather and kind of snow. It's getting hotter and hotter every year. We had the the science centre started melting the other year. So this is going to keep happening. The train line got washed away last summer, and it impacts more on poorer people and people that are the furthest from power. However, if we change our city to be more climate resilient, then that will impact on those communities more. So like a climate resilient city in Glasgow is going to be a fairer city. So if everybody had access to a bit of land that they could grow vegetables and fruit and have access and ownership over food, actual ownership of decent, healthy food that is locally grown, then like that's good for the climate. But more importantly, it gives people some dignity and some choice over their food supply. If we had decent public transport that was free and accessible to everyone, then that's good for the climate. But more importantly, it gives people a way to get to work and back. And it gives people, we can get to college and you can get about your life without spending a fortune. So like that to me is so much what we should be focusing on. And we're trying to drive it, and it is at the top of the agenda at the moment, but it's about action rather than just rhetoric. That's the next battle.
What can we do? I mean, what are the barriers to things like free public transport?
Yeah,
other than the money that First or Arabello are siphoning off like the people that are paying for their tickets, and they go up every
because
year.
We're paying for the transport through the public purse anyway. Why are we not also getting the benefit of it?
Yeah, and if you look at things like the low emission zone in Glasgow that we've been pushing for, and that has started to come in. So that's the idea that you can't come into the city centre if your vehicles are not past a certain standard of pollution. So that's why we've got all the recent buses, like a year and a half ago, I think. So you've seen like the new 38s, the new 75, the yellow one that goes from Castlemilk. So those buses meet a Euro 6 standard. Now I know that. I never thought I'd be a person who knows about standards and buses. But those things
pick up,
indeed. So those kind of things are like, that's important. And we do have to work to some extent with the bus companies, but the amount of subsidies that they are now getting because the bus companies kick up a fuss of like, oh, woe is me, we can't possibly meet your standards and it's so unfair and how dare you target us and blah, blah, blah. So then they get this huge amount of money to like pay for new vehicles, and the council doesn't own them. Like, why are we paying private companies when we should own,
Aye. So corporate socialism, isn't it?
Yeah, like own our trains and everything. So
with the climate stuff, this is one of the things that obviously appeals to me in terms of the Greens platform, is that not just talking about like new ideas, but actually like planning to put them in place as and when you're able to. Like, and that's something that I don't see a lot in terms of this sort of, climate emergency for other political parties. There is a lot of talk, but I don't see a lot of plans or, a lot of the necessary action. And it's something that I also see reflected in another party, the sort of Green platform, is the sort of favourable leaning towards things like UBI. I think the climate emergency and the way work and industry and stuff are changing, as we've covered in sort of multiple previous episodes, is we're moving into like a really sort of new era that needs new ideas, and the stuff that we've held on to in the past just in a lot of senses isn't going to be valid anymore. And I think UBI is one of these big ones. So like, what are you in agreement that some form of UBI should be explored, or is this more a party thing?
No, like this is like, it could be my middle name. I think it's like I think it's one of the most transformative policies that you can think of. Like sometimes people ask, like, if you could do one thing to change things, like what would you do? And I think it would be putting a UBI, because and it's been Green Party policy for a long time. And because I just think, well, exactly as you just said, Matt, like so much of how we've worked and the response to the pandemic has been so fragmented, and so many people have fallen through the cracks of, you don't qualify for this grant, but you have to qualify for this one. And actually, like, councils are now responsible for dispersing like 27 different pots of grants, or some absolutely insane. And like with one financial services team, great, thanks very much, Scottish Government, cheers. So yeah, we just got this like insane infrastructure that's been put up in the last 12 months, rather than just saying, do you know what, we need to just give everyone a floor so that you can't fall through that. And the thing is, why is that not counted as health investment? Think of how transformative it would be for the health service, for dentistry, do you know what I mean, for social work, for homelessness, for addictions. Because if you knew that you always had a certain amount of money coming in, so that you did not have to worry about your basic decency, your basic dignity, in terms of where you had to stay, and enough food for your kids, and clothes, school shoes. Like, I just think it's a no-brainer. Like, why are we even still having this debate? So I'm beyond like, it's an idea whose time has come, because I'm now like, yes, 20 years ago this is what we needed, because it would transform everything else. And I do actually think, like, yeah, people are put off by the cost, obviously, but like, how much have we spent on pandemic relief? And I have no idea. I don't know how to count it up either, because it's been so sporadic. But
the guy Sunak just found 330 billion pounds in the back of the couch one day, and then has just topped it up consistently.
But how much have we just spent on like renewing Trident as well? But
exactly,
UBI would be an upfront cost, of course, but like, we do that all the time. We see that in council budgets of like, you've got to put a certain amount of money into a new programme, because in 5 years' time you're going to get that investment. So that's a fairly sound financial concept, that you put in money upfront because it's going to pay off. So if we put money into a universal basic income, then in 20 years' time, look at how healthy the kids are. Look at how much money we're not having to spend on health services, on trauma counselling, on whatever else is going on. Like, this is the single biggest transformative thing, and I would do it tomorrow if I could.
I think, like, when people talk about the budget, they don't realise that we're already spending billions on housing benefit, universal credit, that would just all go away. And like, if we had like a basic income, and also that there's a few sort of bullshit arguments that come back about, like, well, why should everybody get it? And you can work it into the tax system to take it back off of people that don't need it if you want. But I think the big one that really sings to a lot of people, especially on the right, is the idea that giving people money will lead to a sort of society of lazy people. This is the one that
I know Sodom.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Other than once you start to discredit the budgets, once you start to discredit how much it's going to cost us, and we can work it in. If you look at it, and it's been looked at many times, it is an affordable benefit that we can give to people. The one that always comes back is, oh, people just sit about and do nothing. What would your response be to that if you were met with that argument?
Well,
it's usually a guy like me that's saying it, white beard, you know, like middle class. Like, it's usually guys like me, but yeah, like, what would your argument back to that be?
So, right, on one hand, like, let's think about the segment of our society that already have been given so much money on a plate. So, like, the boys that went to fetties and Eton and stuff and then end up running the country, like, they've been fairly productive, I think, despite their never having to work for money. Not that I agree with what they've done, you know, but
no.
That's such
certainly been productive. That's one way of putting it. They've certainly been productive. So
yeah, right.
They've been busy.
But it's just another thing of like some things that you can get away with if you're rich and you can't do it if you're poor, you know, and like so
like
and
GameStop, you know what I mean? Like last week where, you know, the stock market can formulate algorithms that invent money out of thin air, but some dude on Reddit is not allowed to take £1,000 he's got in savings and actually like take any of their money off them. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. How dare you?
Sorry, aside there.
No, but like that's the thing. It's like I just think those arguments are very much about, you know, poor people should know their place, and it should be. It's just that kind of bootstrapping of like you need to be working in your absolute squalor and misery, and if you're not, then it's your own fault. You know, it's just I don't have a lot of patience for those kind of arguments because I just think, well, look, there will be some people who have too much money. Great, we can tax them more. Fantastic, that gives us a really good tax base for public services. Let's do that. And then, but also like there's been global studies. There's been studies of where this has been put into place, and it's overwhelmingly the case that it's been positive outcomes, and people end up some people don't work as much because they don't have to, and they don't have to do like backbreaking labor. Some people go on to further education instead, or some people have more kids, or some people take up like a random hobby that they love, and like people get more creative. People are, and that's the other thing of like, what are we missing out? You know, because what about all the people who are too poor to pursue their dreams or their writing ability or their, I don't know, inventiveness, or like what are we missing in terms of scientific discoveries or creative output, because like so many people are just not allowed to express themselves because they've got to be stuck in a shit job working shit hours forever.
Yeah, this is a part.
And that's not just one study. That's, you know, everybody that's ever looked at UBI has come back with like broadly the same answer that you've just given us there, aren't they?
Absolutely. And Noel Gallagher says that, I love to say to people, do you like Oasis? Oh yeah, because we all love Oasis. Like Noel Gallagher literally used benefits to fund writing, definitely maybe, and he openly speaks about how without the benefit system, Oasis wouldn't be there. And all of that 80s indie, like that everybody loves, Joy Division, Sex Pistols, right through, all of these guys were claiming benefits. Do you know what I mean? So like that's, and I think we're actually starting to see now that not a lot of working class kids are being able to start art bands, and that's where all the good stuff is. So we're going to miss out so much culture. And
absolutely,
I think that this comes to like, do people value art and do, because that is a big one. When people become writers and they'll become artists, musicians, they'll take up extra things that hobbies, like you're saying, and people are just kind of like, well, and it comes back to that doesn't make money. That's not going to make anybody money. The 40 hours a week and the dead end job with depression and anxiety, and that's what's going to make money. I believe what you just said, it's about keeping poor people in their place. I think somebody said to me, I think it might have even to you and me, Matt, or maybe you said it, Matt, somebody went, do you think the Queen wants to queue up for her flight so there will never be equality? They don't want it because she wants her privilege, and these level of people... Was that not you? I don't know. Maybe I heard it somewhere, but that was the kind of the argument that was made, that if you think that people that are currently millionaires, billionaires, or like the elite class are going to stand in a queue for a British Airways flight while everybody's on the same income, they're not going to vote for it. So they'll continue to vote for that sort of elitism that we've got in our society.
But then that's also, sorry, Paul.
No,
it's just like as if UBI in itself would, I mean, it would certainly help narrow inequality, but also like as long as you've got inherited wealth as well, like those people are fine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
they're going to be okay. There's a lot more work that we need to do. So, it's just it's really frustrating, that kind of hypocrisy as well. You see it all the time, and people have so much like, oh, whataboutery, and rather than just, you know what, let's trust people. That is the same thing actually. It's about like the free school meals thing, and Glasgow thankfully moved to giving out like cash payments for families, because actually, to start with, like, yes, it was help, like it was really good to give, you know, family support in terms of it was vouchers for Iceland, but like I had people phoning me up and be like, how am I going to get there, you know, sorry, farm foods, I don't have a farm foods near me, and then I would have to get the bus, and I don't feel safe on the bus right now, or I can't take my 4 kids with me, or I can't, you know, there's no culturally specific foods, you know, and just trust people that actually they are the experts of their own lives and situations, and you know, we should just, like, we're just missing that whole ability to trust people as the experts in their own lives.
Absolutely. So obviously, you know, conscious of time here, let's, without potentially jinxing anything, let's imagine you get elected. What's the top thing you want to achieve at Holyrood?
Let's be positive. I'm going to say, when you get elected, what is the top thing that you want to achieve?
I was trying not to jinx anything there, you know what I mean? Like,
manifest it, Kim. Manifest it. Tell us what you're going to do.
I hate that word. I hate that. It's just like,
I hate it as well.
White girls on Instagram be like, oh my God, I manifested a thing, rather than like, maybe that was your privilege. Oh God. I don't, do you know what? I don't know yet, because I think I need to, like, I've got so many things and I don't know how to like put them in. And to be honest, that's politics, because actually you've got your wish list, and then you kind of have to be pragmatic of like, okay, well, this issue is coming up. And so I appreciate that. Like, the personal kind of hills that I would die on include, I'm really interested in, so like supporting public services and supporting, so what I've been pushing on locally have been about Whitehill Pool, which is the treasure of Denniston.
I loved that place when I was growing up.
It's phenomenal. I absolutely love it.
20p oxtail soups out of the vending machine in the lobby at the Whitehill Pool, and being able to see into the gym. People just looking into the pool. I love that place.
Vinegary rolling fritter at the Swallow Cafe.
The Swallow Cafe, aye.
Oh, the Swallow Cafe. There's another institution as well. And be George, the local man outside, who is my pal. But yeah, so like we need to sort out council tax. Like, it's an absolute joke how local services are funded or not. So that's a big deal. There's other things there about, so I have become really interested in access to healthcare and who doesn't have access to healthcare.
Okay.
So there's issues about, so for example, there's this amazing organisation called Sahelia, and they're based in actually just outside Springburn in St Rollox, and they support, it's predominantly Black women, but women of colour, and many of whom are migrants, refugees and asylum seekers. And so I've been supporting Sahelia for a while, and I've got to know some of the women, and I just kind of listen to their stories and things. Like, if you go, so like access to health, if you go and try and register for a GP, you're trying to register and maybe your 4th language and the receptionist is really hostile to you, you know, they don't have the patience for you, and or maybe sometimes they're just outright racist. Or maybe when you go and see the GP and there is so sometimes there isn't an interpreter, so you don't know, and you don't know the words for, you know, parts of your body, or cold, or, you know, like fever. How do you know those words? But if there is an interpreter, the interpreter might be a friend of your husband. So it is not safe for you to talk about, you know, domestic abuse or your sexual health or your body parts in front of this person, because it's not culturally, that's not a thing that you would ever do.
Yeah.
Or if you've had experience of FGM, for example, then there's just a whole load of like pain, but also shame and kind of trauma triggers to then go anywhere near a doctor about that. And also you might not know that what you experience is wrong. Like, if you've been in pain since the age of 12, then you don't know that it's wrong. So yeah, like those kind of barriers, and those are things that like no one is talking about. Do you know what I mean? And that's something that I've just been learning about more at a kind of local level, but there's a lot more that I could be doing, I think, in terms of policy about health. But yeah, and because I worked in prisons, I've got so much that I want to talk about our justice system and how it is it's not working for people, and if I had, and can we talk about feminist prisons, where it's okay to have emotions, and can we talk about trauma-informed criminal justice where we recognise the trauma that people have gone through, which doesn't ever excuse anyone's behaviour, but it puts it in context and says, well, look, what else did we think was going to happen in this particular set of circumstances, and how many people have been failed before we ever get anywhere near jail.
Absolutely.
Having spoken to Natalie, having spoken to Natalie yesterday, like that, one of the things that she wanted for the prison or justice reform is for the system to learn lessons and be a wee bit more proactive and a wee bit more preventive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so difficult because it's not a vote winner, so no party is going to go towards that and go for that. So I feel like I have.
It's a vote winner here.
Thank you. Well, I mean, yeah, but I just feel like having gone through, it's not academic for me. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I've had these very, intense conversations with a load of guys, because if you support, so what I would be doing would be going into prisons and doing songwriting workshops, and supporting someone to write a song. It's one of the most intimate experiences that you can have, because they're telling you stuff that sometimes people had never told anyone else. Mm-hmm. And supporting people, or sometimes supporting, if people couldn't write, for example, then I would be literally just being a scribe for them, or trying to get them to express things that they don't have the words for. And so it's I've had these really intensive experiences, and I've been privileged enough to be trusted with people's stories, and I feel like I've got a responsibility as well to try and get some change.
Amazing. You get anything else, mate?
I'm happy with that, mate. Are you happy with that, Kim?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been I feel like we could blather away.
Yeah, absolutely. We just don't want to keep you any longer than and also as well, I think when we're doing these interviews, if once they go over the hour mark, people just tend to sort of slide off after an hour. So we try and keep them quite sort of punchy. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Really, and I'm rooting for you, definitely.
Thank you.
Same here.
Thank you.
It's been great to actually get you in.
Do you want to give yourself a shout, as in if somebody's listening to this and they want to either engage with yourself on social media or even get involved with
the campaign?
Yeah, with your campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I am on social media. So Twitter, it's @CaptainKim. Instagram is councillor.kim.long, and Facebook is, I think, councillor.kim.long as well. But just if you search Kim Long Greens, then you'll find me. And yeah, get in touch. I absolutely need people to be part of the campaign as well. And also there's links on there to give a donation to my campaign, because obviously Greens, we're so much smaller than other parties. We do not have big business, banging on our doors wanting to give us huge corporate sponsorship. So we are very much trying to get by with lots and lots of really small donations each month, but that makes an absolutely massive difference. So yeah, that would be amazing if people are inspired. If you want to see me as your MSP, then help me get there.
Outstanding.
Superb. Thanks very much for your time, Kim.
No, thank you guys so much. This has been an absolute pleasure.
I made